Here now, a man who opposed raising the debt ceiling tonight, and a man who says he knows just whose fault it is for running up our nation's debt. Texas Republican Congressman Kevin Brady. Congressman Brady, it's always a pleasure to have you here, especially in the thick of all these wars on Capitol Hill. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Judge, thank you for having me.
Do most members of Congress really not want the debt ceiling to go up, or do most members of Congress, whether they will say so or not, want the government to be able to borrow all it can so it can keep spending the way it's been spending?
Well, as we're seeing tonight, the answer is the majority of the House does not want this debt ceiling to go up without serious spending cuts, without serious caps on the size of government and discipline on our government as it tries to grow and it needs to shrink. The bottom line is, look, an unconditional debt ceiling vote is off the table. The president needs to know it. Vice president needs to know it. The markets need to know it. And I still think to get this sluggish economy going, we need to restore business and consumer confidence. The way we do it is to make sure they understand we're going to get America's financial house in order.
But the vote tonight, I mean, wasn't it sort of a sham? I mean, being done after the markets closed, so there's no wrong signal sent to the market, knowing that a two-thirds majority, because it was done under a special rule that required that, could never actually be achieved. People voting against raising the debt ceiling before they'll probably vote in favor of it in 2 weeks. Explain to me, please, and to everybody watching us, what was supposed to have been accomplished by the vote tonight?
I think this was actually a very important vote. I think the president and Secretary Geithner are still pushing behind the scenes for an unconditional increase in the debt ceiling. It's not going to happen. And I think it was very important for the Republican leadership in the House to show the president we are taking this off the table, that we're going to fight for these cuts, for these reforms, for these restrictions and limitations. And this vote sends a clear signal that we're not going down this route. We're not going down the unconditional, blind, clean route of raising the debt ceiling.
Will Kevin Brady stick with the vote he cast tonight? Will you be as much against raising the debt ceiling tomorrow and 2 weeks from tomorrow and on 2 months from tomorrow as you were tonight, no matter what promises the big government types in the Democratic Party and some in the Republican Party make to you?
Absolutely, unless there are serious, meaningful $1 trillion of cuts and reforms in the budget, we're not going to raise this debt ceiling. And it is definitely a trust but verify. Promises won't do it. We want to see real deeds. That's why we're at the table to fight for this.
All right, I know you're in favor of the balanced budget amendment, and many good people that are in favor of sound money and no deficit financing are. But even if that were amendment were to pass both houses of Congress by a two-thirds vote, and that's a big maybe, and even if it were to be enacted by 3/4 of the state legislatures, and that's a big maybe, this wouldn't happen for 6-7 years. What's to happen in the next 6-7 years to restrain President Obama or his successors from spending like there's no tomorrow?
Well, I agree with you. The balanced budget I support, especially one that limits the size of the federal government, but that's really long-term, and a few states can derail that and delay it.
Right.
I want more immediate cuts and more immediate restrictions. I think we need, by law, spending limits, automatic cutting of budgets if we don't hit those limits. I want, in effect, guardrails around Paul Ryan's path to prosperity, that budget, because over time, that not just shrinks the size of government in its role, but it actually pays off the federal debt, which I think is critical. That's what we need to focus on.
Let me make this suggestion to you, and I know I'm preaching to the converted because you and I are on the same page on this, as are many of the folks watching us now. I don't think any of those guardrails would work because I think a future Congress could eliminate those guardrails with a majority vote, especially if someone in the White House is thinking the way a future Congress does. Only the legal inability to borrow will force the government to live within its means. Don't you agree with that?
It is, no question, it is one of our greatest limitations and disciplines on the size of federal government. Unfortunately, because we're borrowing 40 to 43 cents of every dollar, it is impossible to live within the cash flow. That's why we've got to have, I think, the type of statutory changes, and frankly, voters have got to keep electing and elect more conservatives who will make sure that those laws are actually upheld. This is going to be a big battle.
Congressman Brady, it's a long night for you. We appreciate your being here. It's a pleasure as always. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate it.